Okay, good morning, everyone. Good morning. Thank you so much for being here at 9 o'clock in the morning. Really appreciate it. I know many of you were out. I hear there was like a big group out on the Rhine last night for drinks. Yes, fantastic. Super happy to hear that. So thanks for those of you who are out and also here this morning. Yes, committed to the cause. Okay, so this morning we have a really exciting panel on gender and AI. And we had talked, you know, when you're prepping for these sessions, you of course have meetings ahead of time, and we had talked about having like a really catchy title for the panel. You know, should it be the future of AI and how it's going to shift our perceptions of beauty, or you know things like that. And then we agreed that the things that we want to talk about are so broad, and we want to keep it, you know, open and organic and flexible. So we agreed to just leave it as AI and gender, and to kind of see where it takes us. Yeah. So that's to explain a little bit about the title. Now, I'm going to let, instead of me reading bios from the paper, I'm going to let each of the fantastic panelists introduce themselves in a few sentences, if you can, and to also say something unique about themselves. So for all of the keynotes, I'm usually talking about their dancing skills or their alarm clock habits. So let's keep that tradition so that we have a bit more of a casual feel. So I'll start. I'm Professor Aimee van Wynsberghe. I'm director of the Institute for Science and Ethics and founder of the Bonn Sustainable AI Lab. I like to do yoga and jog, and I love to drink Prosecco. That's all you need to know about me. So I pass it on then to the panelists. Please introduce yourselves. You have the mic, yeah.
So, is it on? Okay, good morning. My name is Hanna Meißner. I'm professor at the Center for Interdisciplinary Women's and Gender Studies at the Technische Universität Berlin. And I love gardening.
Gardening, okay. And also Hanna is the representative from the German Association for Gender Studies.
Thank you, Hanna. I'm Sheila Beladinejad. I'm a consultant, and I'm the founder of Women in AI and Robotics. And fun fact about me, I used to have a British accent. And going to an American school, you know, at the age of 10, I think, I lost the accent there, so, yeah.
Listening to your fun fact, I don't think I'll be fun at all. I'm Modestha, Mensah, guest researcher at Sustainable AI Lab, but a PhD candidate at University of Ghana, in Ghana. I'm here under the Argelanda Scholarship. I like to dance.
Yes, and she's a good dancer. I can actually vouch for that. Fantastic dancer.
Thank you.
Okay, so getting into the topic of the panel, a question for each of you. Can you say something about, from your perspective, what does AI and gender mean? So what are the things that you're thinking about? Because you each come from very different disciplines and backgrounds. So when you hear AI and gender, what is it that comes to mind? Anyone is free to start.
Okay, let me start. When I think about AI and gender, I think from a gender studies perspective, and I think as a sociologist in gender studies. And I think helpful for me is to consider AI as a technology and what we know about technologies and gender. And one of the central questions is who is involved in envisioning and making these technologies, because we know that technologies are not just tools in the world, but they are worldviews are embedded in these technologies. So it's important who makes these technologies. And for modern technologies, we can say it was a very specific group of people, men from a certain social background, European men, white men specifically. So, and this group of people shared a very specific worldview, which we can maybe say it's a kind of an entitled individualism and entitled individual independency. So these people were put in a position by social structures, power relations, that made it possible for them to ignore materialities of bodily life, of embodied materialities. So caring, healing, nurturing, cleaning, and so on. We all know that. And that is very important because this is embedded in the technologies. And I think so we think of who is involved And then we can come to the conclusion we need different people in the making of technologies, and that is true. But it's not all, because it's not the individuals, actually, because this entitled individualism is not tied to a certain body. Other people can also embody this kind of subjectivity. So we really need to consider the social structures within which these technologies are developed and evolve and so on. And the gender order is, or one of the functions the gender order has, is that through the gendered order, some parts, or these embodied materialities, or parts of the embodied materialities, have been delegated to other people, to feminized people, to women, and also, of course, in the colonial context, to others, to racialized others. So this invisibilizing of labor, and I think this is also very important if we look at AI. What is invisibilized, and how is labor invisibilized, human labor, and how have technologies in this context, because the context is also a context where we have an economic dynamic of profit maximization, and not of starting from the human needs and so on. So how were these technologies always also embedded in the need for profit maximization and for cheapening of labor? And the gender system is one of the systems where the cheapening of labor is made viable because it is naturalized into the task of women. So this is what I think about when I think about gender and AI.
Thank you. So gender and AI, for me, when we started this Women in AI and Robotics back in February of 2021. Being a technologist myself, coming from the technical angle, I thought, okay, we don't have enough diversity in AI and we need to do something about it. And that's what my thought was when we initially started. And I was, focused on, okay, what we need to do is have some workshops and, teach women about AI, make them excited about it and so on. But then along the way, I found myself becoming a women's rights advocate all of a sudden, because we have so many obstacles. It's not just a matter of interest. It's not just a matter of having the passion to get into technology, but we have so many barriers to entry. And what are we doing about removing those barriers to entry? And, so we formed a collaboration with UN Women on SDG 5, gender equality. But then I started looking at all the SDGs and realized each and every one of them in some shape or form are impacting women the most. And, and we're the ones speaking about it, and we're trying to do something about it. And, so there needs to be a lot of collaboration between NGOs, government organizations, people. Each and every one of us can do something about it, right? And something struck a chord with me yesterday that Caesar mentioned in the keynote talk, where he said that being invited to participate in these things. For example, in the African countries, they, like I heard OpenAI said we had someone represent Africa. But is that enough though? So if we are invited, given a seat at the table to implement AI, is that enough? I don't think that's enough. So we need to have, decision-making power. We need to be engaged in leadership roles. We need so many different things to get to, somewhere close to equality. And unfortunately, we're nowhere close to that at this point. And the criticality of the matter is something that people question oftentimes, and it is critical, and everyone should be concerned about it, and not just women. So now I find myself, looking at things more holistically and not just from the technological aspect, But, you know, and it's so enriching to hear people's perspectives from, you know, philosophical background, from ethical background, and so on, and realize that we need to look at things from, you know, the entire life cycle of AI, and not just how it's created and how to make it efficient, but also, you know, how do we maintain it, how do we, you know, move forward, and so on. Yeah.
Thank you. Of course, AI is currently being referred to as the fourth revolution, but because it has so much promise, it's trying to make our lives easier, make reality more comprehensible to us. But for me, the first question I even ask myself is the intelligence embedded in AI. What kind of intelligence are we even talking about? Because so far, it's intelligence of computation. Is that all intelligence we have? What about the intelligence that women generally exude, as is popularly known as care, emotional support? Are these considered as intelligence? When we say AI, there's a problem there. But maybe that is for a future discussion. But as it is now, currently, from an African perspective and from a woman's perspective, in Africa, we already have fundamental problems, existential problems that we are grappling with. And then we have this new technology that has so much promise, but of course, it is emerging from a society that already has deeply seated values. Values that generally do not paint a woman in a very bright picture. So the problem is this technology going to exacerbate that problem, or is it going to actually help eradicate that problem? And as it stands now, it's doing more harm than good. Why? Because even the data that is used to train these machines, that is used to compute, we don't have them from the women in Africa. We don't, because they don't have access. The people in this industry, how many women are represented there? Very marginal, because they don't have the technological know-how. They don't have the skill. They are closely related to the environment because of what is perceived as a woman's job in the African societies. They work with the environment really closely. Every impact of AI is directly on them, but are their views sought when these AI applications are being designed to solve these problems? No, there are not. So from where I stand, I think that there is so much that has to be done, especially for the African woman's lived experiences, and I think we have so much work to do. These will be my initial comments.
Okay, thank you. So, yeah, as I was mentioning, very different perspectives about empowering women, which I think is sort of something that the three of you share in common, but also from a broader perspective, but then from the very micro level, listening to, seeking out the female lived experience in sub-Saharan Africa, and how can this play a role in the development of AI, the kinds of applications, or how to regulate. So I wonder, something that we had also discussed when we were prepping is that AI often categorizes things or people, right? There's this binary consideration: normal, abnormal, male, female, yeah, zeros and ones. Yeah? And something that we had talked about was this idea of beauty as well. Beautiful, not beautiful, but also, it's young women, young girls who are exposed to, images that are popping up, or wanting to, put, filters so that they look a certain way. And I wonder if you can say something about, this idea of the future of gender when it comes to AI, and whether or not this is something that's unique for AI, or is this something that we've been struggling with? I mean, we have been struggling with this, but how does AI change the game? Whoever wants to start.
Yeah, this notion of beauty is actually quite concerning to me, because I see these AI-generated images that are popping up. Many of my connections on LinkedIn have posted headshots of themselves. Look, AI created this beautiful headshot and so on. But then we have a definition of beauty that is dictated by, the media, the magazines, the beauty, industry, and so on. And that is what the models have been trained on. So when, they want to beautify us, they give us makeup a certain way, none of these pictures that I have seen have shown anybody with a tattoo or a nose ring or, something that is not in the norm, right? So then we're making matters worse. So not only are the youth exposed to these things on all these other platforms and whatnot, but now AI is deepening these issues even further. And like Modestha mentioned earlier, that these biased data are seeping their way into the generative AI and these image creations and whatnot. And we need to speak up and do something about it. And why not, train these models on a variety of things? And is this the most important thing that we can do with AI? Like, that's another thing. Okay, it's fun, but this is where we get lost in defining AI for good, right? I mean, going to a studio and taking a photo, I think I still prefer doing something like that and having that human interaction and art being remaining humanized. Right? So that's my 2 cents. So.
Yeah, so what you just said is absolutely correct. We have a certain conception of beauty that is popularized in music, in popular culture, in movies, in magazines, as you've rightly said. How we appeal beautiful to both our men and women and all that. But for the African woman, it's a bit different. Because then the image out there is a typical Western European woman with long straight hair, with thin nose, with thin lips, with a certain slim figure, which is typically not an African woman because we have woolen hair, thick nose, thick lips, and all that. So then you have people who have deeply of course, part of the colonial legacy as well. So because you want to feel important, you want to feel belonged, you want to feel appreciated, you have internalized these concepts so much that you actually try to put in measures to fit the stereotype. So what do? If you have the money, you do surgeries. The nose, the body, the lips, the hair, and the things people are willing to do to have a straight hair or look like a European, it's...
What do they do?
Yeah, so our hair is wooling, it's not straight. So before it can be straight, like what you have, it's either you apply very harsh chemicals to it, so that it cooks your hair, and then when it's washed, it becomes a bit straight and silky. But of course, as it continues to grow, the natural woolen hair comes again, so you have to go cook it again. So you do this like every month, and if you're not careful, of course, it damages your scalp. And if you're not careful, you're losing even the hair that you have. And if you don't want to do that, you can go for extensions. And these extensions are super expensive. You need resources for more important things, but this is so important to you because that is the image out there, and you want to feel good, accepted. So you have to do all these just to fit in. If you don't have the money, well, you can rely on what AI is doing for us, and there are all these long filters and beautiful, so-called beautiful stuff. So you have a certain image in public on social media, which presents you as light skin, long hair, thin nose. But when you actually go out and they see you in person, it's a different person altogether. So then you're finding a really difficult situation or position where you have to balance the two. So you have a beautiful life on social media, but in reality, you are depressed because you don't look anything like what you've put out there. And it's just ridiculous. So this thing that I continue saying about AI, whether it's going to improve the system or rather exacerbate the problem, I think it's doing the latter, and it needs discussion, conversation about.
Yeah, I don't think I have very much to add. So much has been said already. But maybe to take this, or come as a sociologist and analytically, that it's very important to consider how beauty or standardized beauty is connected to power. It's the standard of the elites. It's the imagination of the elites, and it has a disciplining effect on people, on women. And what I think maybe is also important is to, and this comes back to the world view embedded in technologies, how did we come to perceive of beauty as a quality of a single person or an object, something that can be measured, that can be compared, and is beauty, the way we live beauty, we experience beauty, not much more the relationship. It's something that we cannot qualify, we cannot really compare, and we cannot measure.
I wondered, I mean, just really quickly following up on all of this, do you think it's possible that AI has the potential to help break the stereotypes? I mean, right now we see how it's being used, but what if there was an organization, Women in AI and Robotics, that said, that, you know, we can use AI to create different images of what a beautiful woman might look like or might be represented as? I mean, do you think that that's a possibility?
We try, but the problem is it's a battle. It's not easy for us to, you know, rock the boat and make a difference, because you need people to hear you and act on it. And, you know, you need support. We need data, most importantly, gathering the data, and then implementing it, and then, you know, using it and so on. And as a charity organization, you know, it's not easy to get collaborators to help us with the implementation of these things. Of course, we try to make a difference, but it is a long battle, and I think that there is some responsibility that lies with the companies that are, you know, producing these things and putting it in the hands of our children, and you know, changing their perspective. As a parent, you try to educate your children, you know, against these things at home. Okay, don't be fooled by this, and don't do this or do that. Or I didn't give electronics to my children until they were much older than everybody else, and so on. But sooner or later, it catches up with them. And then what can you do? I mean, like, you know, there isn't. So the responsibility, I think, lies with the producers of these applications, and not just solely on us to try to remedy it. And now, you know, it's out there. You know, you don't distribute fireworks to the public and say, okay, be careful and read the instructions on the label, and then everybody focused on, you know, fixing the label. Wow. Right, so.
Sorry, did you want to comment on that as well?
Yeah, I mean, my question is, why do we even need AI to deal with a problem like beauty? Yeah. It's so, I mean, we have more important things to think about, because beauty really, it's intangible. You can't measure it. So what standards are you going to use to define beauty so that these apps will have these features, those features, so that a person who fits into these is considered as a beautiful person? No, it's really unnecessary, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's amazing to think about the kinds of apps that are made, you know, in the global north, like cute kittens and things like that. And then from a different context, it's, well, how can I make sure that there's food on the table for me and my family this week? So I wonder, yesterday we had a panel with UNESCO. And even though the topic wasn't AI and gender, that came up, and we were asking the representatives from UNESCO, you know, what are you doing? And one of the participants was talking about how they did a big workshop in Ghana, and they found that this woman was saying she was the only woman in the room. There was some elementary school or high school students who came to the conference. There was something like 500 people there, but she was the only woman at her level as a professor that was there. And we asked, you know, okay, what are you going to do about it? UNESCO, what are you going to do about it? And kind of the conversation kind of came to a halt. But I wonder then, you know, if the question is asked to you, or what do you see from your space about the involvement of women in conferences, in design, in whatnot, and then what should we do about it? Let's solve it right here, right now, today.
Well, I have the mic, so I'll start first. So talking about UNESCO, initially when we started the Women in AI and Robotics, we had some members in our community who were from Ethiopia. And, you know, my thoughts and my feelings were towards, let's establish this organization in Europe and be strong enough that we can help, you know, others in other countries and do something there as well. So that was the ultimate goal for me. And, you know, for 1.5 years, we tried to do something for the community in Ethiopia. And by doing something, I mean, like, we just wanted them to sit in a room, have a few laptops at hand, have internet, have electricity, and then we run a workshop together and do something fun and cool and, you know, educational together. We couldn't make that happen. We failed. And actually, I did approach the UNESCO folks yesterday, and I said, we need support from organizations such as yours on the ground, NGOs that already exist there, who can help us find a room with internet and, you know, and help us do something. But it's not easy, you know, it needs collaboration from so many different levels of society, and then it doesn't help if there are things going on locally where the priority shifts. Okay, yeah, they are very eager to learn and get connected to the outside world, but, you know, if they don't have electricity for 2 days, then they have other priorities than, you know, learning about AI. So that's the struggle that, you know, we have felt, and I have knocked on everybody's door, and I continue to do so, but we're not making an impact as much as I would wish to, yeah, so that's...
Because the basic infrastructure isn't there be able to make...
Right. The infrastructure isn't there, the political aspect of things, the obstacles that women face, you know. One time when we had a connection with the team over there, you know, they told me they had traveled for 1.5 hours to get to the university where there was internet and a laptop that they could sit and connect with us. So those are the obstacles that they're facing, yeah.
I'm not surprised. This is very familiar because, I mean, like I was saying, we have serious problems. So you're lucky that you even have the women available who are interested in your cause and want to be part of it. But that is just the beginning. You need a structure. And that's why I'm saying that AI will not be a fourth revolution in Africa, because even the first, second, and third, we have not completely benefited enough. The challenges are multidimensional. There are structural challenges. We don't have the infrastructure, yes. We don't have the technical know-how. We don't have the skills. Internet is extremely expensive. It's the most expensive. It's so expensive that, of course, you have to pay huge sums just to have access to internet. And the most common resource that you can use is the phone. And not a lot of people cannot afford a smartphone that will give them access to this internet. Talk much of a laptop. So these women that you're talking about, they don't have the laptops. They can use their phone. But even access to that internet on the phone will be a problem, because even if they have the money to purchase the internet, the connectivity is low. So these are like super level problems. And personally, on their own personal level, they may have other obstacles that will prevent them from participating in these familial responsibilities, social responsibilities. So I think that if AI is supposed to be taken seriously and do the good that it intends to do, these are conversations that should be had. It shouldn't only sit in Europe or West and then think that, oh, we're doing great. No, go to these communities and see how, cooperate with their governments, with their corporations, with the startups, and see how you can actually make these things work better for everybody to take full advantage of. Otherwise, what you only end up doing is that you are further increasing the gap, which is already there. But you see, this is a privileged technology from my perspective. And you only make the situation worse because you keep having fewer people in the top class, in the elite, and the mass at the bottom. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe to add a bit from the perspective, even in the global north, it's an uphill battle to get women into the fields in engineering, and there have been so many programs, and one of the things that we realize is that it's not enough to focus on the women, getting them interested, empowering them, encouraging them. The problem is in the fields themselves, in the cultures, in the way that questions are framed, whose problems are considered as problems that we need to solve, what is considered as a solution. The question of tech solutionism came up yesterday in the keynote. I think that has a lot to do with this, this entitled individualism, this magic that comes with this figure of thinking that we can just make up some technology and then solve problems. But we need to really question what the problems are. And I think that is a lot of what you were talking about. Where are the problems actually that need to be solved? And will there be solutions, and how would these solutions look like? Yeah. Maybe not technology.
Yep. So at this point, I'd like to also open up the panel to take questions from the audience, as well as questions from all of the online participants. For those of you who are joining us online, please use the Q&A function that you can find and feel free to ask a question. Also, for the audience, please feel free to raise your hand to ask a question. And, okay, yes, we'll start with that. I also have another question to ask, but yes, please. Luca, sorry, can you wait for the mic, Luca? Thanks.
Thanks a lot. I just wanted to ask.
I don't think it's on.
Now, yes. So thanks a lot. Very interesting discussion. I just wanted to ask something. So of course, as someone who identifies as a man, I am aware that how I deal or how I see the impact of AI, specifically when it comes to issues like beauty and so on, is definitely different, right? So I would like to learn from your perspective a little bit, because I see some things a little bit differently, because you talked about beauty and this Western European, specific way of how women should look like and so on. But what I actually increasingly see is that AI and generally digital technologies incorporate also other women of color, if you may, or other figures, and what I think is that they are basically looking for profit, right? So whatever that would work to generate profit. And I wanted to hear from you, how do you see this, basically how the AI also integrate or kind of try to take on board other, looks for women that are not necessarily Western European. So basically how I see it from a man's perspective is that whatever works for those firms, they want money, and if that's someone who looks, quote unquote, looks African, fine, Western, Eastern, doesn't matter, they just want the profit, right? So wanted to hear from you how you see that.
Yeah, I understand your position. Of course, the developers are interested in their money, but you're developing these things for society. So that also goes back to the frameworks that ground some values that we have as people. My rights, what works for me, it's the money that I need. Have you also considered values that look at your relationship with others? What we usually call the Ubuntu value. Inclusiveness, you're being there for the other people that you share the environment with. Have you considered those values? So while you're so concerned about the money that you're making, what is your view on the impact on these other people that you're living with in society? Because like it or not, whatever happens in society comes right back to you. It does. So don't be too interested in the money for now, because there are long-term effects. Your own children, your female friends, your sisters are going to grow up and then suffer these same problems, but you're making profit today. It will come very soon. So I think that we should also change our value systems and focus not too much on what works for us as individuals, what our rights are, but we consider how it impacts the people we share our communities with. We should be more communal than individual rights-based, because who are we without the other people, really? You are who you are because of the people you share your communities with. That is what I'll say.
To add to that, I think, what if we take the brains behind these apps that want to make money and put it to good use? What, like you mentioned earlier, what problems are we trying to solve? Why don't we focus on real human problems and put those minds to work on those problems and make it profitable, right? I mean, these problems that we're trying to solve should be benefiting people, which means we could be making money out of it, right? So it is possible, and why do we need to have these kind of apps, with the filters and whatnot to begin with? Is my 2 cents. So,
Did you want to add anything, Hanna?
Well, yeah, maybe the question why we have so many images, why do we need more images in this world? And a lot of the images we have are connected to advertising. It's commercialization of bodies in advertising, and we have long debates about that and here we have a problem of sexism, of depiction of women in advertising that has been shown to be very harmful for children, for women, for their relation to themselves and their bodies. So we have long debates about why do we need these pictures and should we regulate that? So why do we need more gadgets to produce more pictures than people who don't even exist? Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting to listen to there's a push to make money, and if we're having this conversation with big tech, yeah, they are going to say, I want to make more money, but I think it's also beautiful to see this theme that Benedetta was bringing up yesterday about let's use our imagination to think differently. That's how I sort of see the discussion between the two of you going. Okay, I have Sebastian has a question. Luca, can you bring the mic up here? Sebastian is in the third row, brown jacket, and then Doji is after. And then, yeah.
Thank you.
And then you.
Yeah, I was also very impressed by the description of the terror of beauty standards that Modestha has given to us, that African women are subject to. And since these things that are to be altered, like the shape of the nose, the shape of the lips, the hair, and so on, are aspects of what geneticists would call gene expression, I was asking myself if one could not even think about these, critically think about these practices in terms of a soft form of genocide. Because classical genocide is operating at the level of genetic equipment and aims at extincting certain sorts of genetic equipment. But this new form of genocide seems to operate on the level of gene expression by aiming at extincting certain modes of genetic expression, like these features of the face. And so on. So yeah, that's just a spontaneous idea. In order to have a more powerful critical tool in arguing against these kind of practices, if that would make sense, maybe. I mean, it's not only African women; it's of course also Asian women who are subject to these kinds of pressures, like eyelid operation and so on and so on.
Do any of you want to comment on Sebastian's comment? I mean, there's a fascinating paper in there, Sebastian. No? Okay. Doji, Luca, can you hand that?
Thank you. So, I have a wife and daughters, and I realize that my culture does not give them the freedom to, maybe in the kitchen, they are so much in the kitchen. It's like every house chore they are supposed to do it. So I built an AI to help them, to assist them, because I care. Now I hear that the AI I have built is based on, is gendered. That is the feedback I somehow got from the conversation. I want to solve a problem in the society. So I built an AI to help my wife, to help my children, but it's gendered. I don't know whether you understand my question.
What's the AI? Is it Amazon Alexa?
Well, because
Get rid of it.
hearing the conversation that AI is now gendered, is sexualized,
Yeah.
because women are, so we build the AI, those kind of, and I feel uncomfortable. But from the beginning, the intention is to help my wife because I care.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what you want to say about that.
What's the AI that we're talking about, Dodgy?
I don't know. It's general.
Oh, is this a hypothetical?
Yes.
Yeah. You should have started with that. Okay, so I think it depends on what kind of AI we're talking about, yeah. And we understand you have the very best of intentions, Dodgy. But what kind of AI is important?
Yeah, then again, this is a question of technology, and this is an old question of household technologies brought in to help the women in the household. And empirically, it shows that it has mostly changed the work and even added in some aspects to the work, because the standards of cleanliness, of how often do you clean the carpet and so on, has changed. And it has also cleaning carpets. There's a lovely book by Ruth Cohen, More Work for Mother, which shows the history of household technologies in the US. And there's one example of the carpet. Cleaning the carpet used to be a job done by a woman, the children, and the man. The woman says, now it's time to clean the carpet. The child takes it outside, hangs it up, and the man beats the carpet. And then we have the carpet, the vacuum cleaner, and now it's only the task of the woman doing the cleaning. So we have all this. So maybe the question is somewhere else. Why do we have this division of labor in the first place? Why do we have certain kinds of work that is unwaged, that does not show up in the GDP, which is essential work? We all need this kind of work. To what extent and how clean and how often we have to, that is up to discussion, but we need caring and maintenance and so on. So the question may be somewhere else. We have to change other things first before talking about the technologies that help us do this kind of work.
Yeah, do you need to buy an AI, or why don't you do the vacuuming and wash the dishes? And then your wife goes to school to learn about AI and she becomes the AI expert, yeah?
That can be the tyranny of the minority also. I argue for moderation. I always go for moderation, because there's a possibility of the tyranny of the minority, because we become the very thing that we fight against. And that's the danger we need to be careful with.
Yeah, so I agree with you, but all three of the women are saying we need to be bold and we need radical changes.
You spoke about gender and AI. I was expecting that there should be two men there also, because they're also part of the gender classification.
So that's an interesting point. I'm also finding that there's lots of men asking the questions. Oh wait, no, microphone back over here. Luca. Oh. Okay.
But this is it's great to have these dialogues and hear everybody's perspective, and I appreciate that. And yes, we do. We had a panel last year at Automatica, and I invited someone. He himself said, so you fulfilled the need for having a white old man on the panel.
Yeah.
And so we do engage, and this is great that we're getting a lot of questions. And I'm with Aimee. Empower your daughter and your wife to build their own AI if they need it, if it's necessary. So I'm sure they can do a good job with it. Yeah.
You have it. Yes.
Thanks so much for a fascinating discussion. I just wanted to pick up exactly on this about the role of agency, because I think we attribute too much to technology. So it's like, why is the AI doing this, or why is social media? Can we take back some of this agency in how we raise our kids, how we prioritize or value things in society? And what struck me was what you mentioned about this sort of entitlement of individuality. And I'm thinking now of who's controlling AI at the moment. If you look at the Silicon Valley bro culture of who's developing it, how much exposure do they have to the race legacy that we deal with, to the gender legacy? So when they say, this will make the world better, do they even know what are the infrastructural issues we're dealing with? Thank you.
Yeah, Absolutely, I think this is a very, very important question. Whose experiences are evaluated? But the question of agency is very difficult because, yes, I think we really have to push back against all these notions of inevitability that go along with these technological developments, as if these are natural processes that are somehow happening. And I think, at least as far as I see it right now, this is coming up a lot more in public discussions now, the concentration of power in certain, particularly with respect to big tech, but of course also fossil fuel companies and so on, concentration of power, which is so hard. And we touched on that yesterday with the keynote, what to do about it and where to get the political force and the agency and collective agency. And I think this is a very important thing, to think more about collectively, where are we in the real world organizing? And I see a lot of labor organizations around technology at the moment organizing. The tech workers were mentioned yesterday, for example. And we have these workers I think in Nairobi who were organizing and setting up Gewerkschaft. A union, thanks. A union, we're unionizing. And so I think this is something we should also focus on. Where are people on the ground organizing, getting together collectively to formulate their own problems in their own way and saying what their solutions would be?
And I think, to your point, the best we can do as parents is just to educate our children, and they will be exposed to all of this anyway, so they need to be equipped with the right tools and the critical thinking and ask the right questions. So when I first allowed my children to be on Instagram, my son was liking every single post so fast that he kept being, kicked out because they thought he was a bot. And I'm like, what is your point of liking? So, and it happened to him multiple times. And then I had to sit him down and explain that, what you're doing, you're actually helping some people get rich, and your data is being used. And so I kind of, had to sit down and educate them. He doesn't do that anymore, but he is older now and can think wiser. But yeah, we can, share these things with them, but we can't fight the system. So they will get exposed to it from school, they can't live in a bubble, right? So we just need to give them the right tools and the right, critical thinking abilities to question things.
Yes, thank you. Aside this, I think that policy is also very important, right? So that if these big techs are promoting their apps and they're increasing the gender biases, what we're doing here, this workshop, the research that is going to come out of it, what other people are doing elsewhere, should inform policy so that these become, and I'm happy about the act that UNESCO was talking about yesterday, so that these AI systems are able to meet the principles of these acts to reduce the disparities, the gaps, and the stereotypes that are out there. And Aimee and I were working even on a paper that argues that we look at values from outside Europe, because AI is a global property. So you cannot ground it on values of a certain group of people alone. It has to be very diverse so that issues from different corners of the world are taken up by these technical people, because they don't know these issues we talk about, right? So it's our responsibility. So I think academics, we need to do a lot so that it informs policy to shape the technical people in their design and deployment of AI apps and systems.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the very interesting discussion and a lot of insights for me. I'm sort of stuck on the question of whether these systems, the way they are built now, because based on the size of the data sets they're trained with, they're necessarily, I think, a replication of what we've deemed worthy of to put into writing and what we've deemed worthy of taking pictures of in the past. If that's the basis of the technology, can we even get past the point where we're sort of putting out fires and addressing inadequacies that we find in these systems? And is that kind of technology able to get to a transformative point in questions of inequalities?
So, can I go? Yeah. Yesterday, I moderated a session on gender and AI, and some of the presenters were looking at AI technologies that are able to bridge the gender disparities as far as hiring into the workforce is concerned. And they had these really brilliant alternatives that what was scary was the fact that they should be gender blind. I argued seriously about that. But what these other solutions do is to try to filter out any form of discrimination against the applicant's gender, right? So I think that if the tech people are aware of this, that's a problem. Are they aware of these problems? If they are, and they have the will, they can do it. Because these suggestions that the ladies made, so far they've shown that they're making so much progress in terms of bridging the gender disparity gap in hiring people into the workforce. So I think that's what, if the will is there, it can be done. We just need to be interested.
I think it has to go a little bit beyond just interest. So the interest definitely needs to be there, but it also needs to be enforced. So, and where does the responsibility lie, right? I recently went to TUM, had invited Sam Altman, and, you know, he was asked a question about the CO2 emissions of ChatGPT. And I wrote this down. I can't remember exactly what the words that he said, but the essence was like, we will get to it eventually. To the CO2 issue, we will get to it eventually. The most important thing is that we now have a tool that can cure cancer. And there's more good that can be done than bad, so let's focus on that. So who's holding OpenAI accountable for what they have, you know, the monster that they have leashed? And if we're going around and, you know, praising these kind of irresponsibilities, then, you know, the divide keeps getting deepened. So, you know, there are some companies that have interests. And in fact, there are some companies right here in Germany who were doing the same thing in terms of, you know, what ChatGPT and OpenAI and whatnot, but they haven't released it yet. And I thought to myself, maybe they felt more responsible. Maybe that was the reason why. I don't know where they stand technologically or whatever, but I think it needs to be enforced, and it can't be solely relying on people's goodwill and intentions and the definition, you know, of AI for good. And technically, like you said, it is possible to reach that convergence where we say, okay, we have sufficient data representing the whole population from all the demographics and whatnot, but it has to go hand in hand, the willingness and the you know, the enforcement of it. And there's so many acts, the EU Act and this, you know, in Canada as well and so on. But then who is enforcing it, and how can it be enforced, and are there any penalties or are there any incentives for doing it right? So I think that it needs to go hand in hand.
Just very briefly, I'm very skeptical about the capacities of technologies or AI in specific to be transformative in terms of social relations, of inequalities, and so on. I'm really not sure. I think this is where we need pattern recognition, and it's helpful to recognize regularities. These technologies can be helpful, but we have to really decide why do we need patterns, and what? And gender studies is a lot about patterns of gender inequalities. But the point is to dismantle these, and so we need to find the irregularities. We need to find where these patterns are not working, where and so on. And I think transformative power, and here we're back to agency, is in political action and not in the technologies.
Paolo.
Yeah, I just have I know we're running out of time, but a reflection that came to me is this capacity that these systems have now as acting as a mirror to us, because it's very clear that we can
look into Dali or Midjourney and type beauty, and in a way represents the Western standard of beauty. But in that, there's still power dynamics, and there's still a way in which both men use the technology and women use the technology. And if I think of the Silicon Bro, you know, and kind of like the West Coast, a lot of the clout kind of culture and OnlyFans and all these things where women also use the technology in order to gain financial means through it. So this is also kind of, for me, pushing up of, yeah, there are ways in which men try to get their power in the world, but there's also ways in which women try to get power in the world. And AI, I think it's kind of bringing those up to the surface. And I agree with you that this is not a technological issue as such. The technology can be used for good or bad, but we must be very critical to be able to reflect upon this and say, is this what we want for our future generations? Do we want the women in our lives to feel like for them to be valuable, they need to be beautiful and pretty? Do we want for the men in their lives to feel like for them to be considered strong, that they don't need to be emotionally available, or, you know, it's amplifying these things. And I think this is an issue, this is a human problem. It's not a technological problem. And for that, we need to start discussing as human beings, as men, as women, and try to also make sense of this gender war. Because I don't want to be in war. I want to be critical and understand how is it that I as a man at times perpetuate gender biases or issues unconsciously, but I want to be met with vulnerability and care for me to be able to reflect and not have to defend myself. And the same, I want to be able to stand up to a woman and say, you know what, I think this, what you're doing is causing me harm. And I also would like to men to speak up around these issues so that we can have a balanced dialogue that goes beyond technology, using that as perhaps as a lens to reflect. So I just wanted to put that perspective out, and it was more of a question to hear your thoughts around this as well, because I also agree we don't have representation of men in this panel. And a part of me was like, because I also heard that a panel got canceled because it was only gonna be men, and the men were like, oh, we don't feel comfortable doing the panel now because there's not gonna be representation from the other side. But now I see the complete opposite, and it's perfectly fine. So I'm like, oh, wait a second.
So maybe I'll address that, because this was actually a strategic move on my part. I think, so I've been in the AI ethics space for quite a long time now, and the majority of conferences that you go to have panels, right? These all-male panels, and a movement started about 5 years ago where people would decline going to a conference if it was males because there was no representation of women. And so then we started to have a change where you'd have a token female on the panel, and I spent about 5 years being the token female on a panel, just so that you could have a woman on the panel. But this was a choice that I made to have only women on the panel, because women are so underrepresented in this space, in the space of AI ethics. And there are so many times that you see on Twitter, I'm doing a conference, but I can't find a woman for the panel. And so this is also a moment to say there are so many women that can speak about this and that you need. So anyone who's following online, if you're organizing a conference or anyone here, there are 3 women that you can ask to join your panels, because we're constantly hearing there's not enough women in this space. And there aren't enough women in this space, but this is a moment to showcase the women who are here and who have valuable insights to contribute. And so it was an intentional, explicit move on my part to have women to say, and also for hopefully our children. Well, yeah, our children, we have daughters, yeah? Our daughters will also look up and say, look at what mommy is doing on stage, yeah? This is also a moment to be role models and to say, you can go into AI in a variety of different capacities. Technically, from the social sciences, from the humanities as well. You don't have to just go into the tech space. There's a variety of different things that young girls and women can do. So it's meant to be empowering. All right, I'll take your point into consideration that you want a man on the gender and AI panel in the future, but I did do this intentionally for Doji. But so we are running out of time. Did you want to make a comment on what Paolo was talking about, wanting to have these more natural, vulnerable interactions between people, with the Silicon Tech bros? That's who you want to have these vulnerable moments with?
I mean, also have to say that this also comes from me exploring kind of what you consider to be in some of the toxic masculine traits of the red pill and the blue, black pill community, and these men that feel like they don't have an ability to communicate and engage with women. And there's a book called The Boy Crisis, which also a lot of men suffer in silence. And I would like to bring that up to the surface as a man, because a lot of the issues right now, for example, if you look in the US, 80% of the men that are in jail come from a fatherless home. So there is still a crisis of what I consider to be healthy masculinity. And I think for me, I would like to address that and have conversations around this, because I think that there is always, when someone is benefiting at the cost of someone else, it's because there's an unhealed or a dysfunctional dynamic there. And I think this is what technology is showing us. There is a dysfunctional dynamic in our genders and in the way that we are relating. And that is something that we need to heal. And for that, we need to have conversations where we hear each other out. We hear the pain that we as men have caused to women, but also the pain that women have caused to men, to try to see if we can come to a place where we can learn how to relate in a more healthy way, regardless of technology.
So I think that's beyond the scope of the panel a little bit, but maybe that's for the coffee break, yeah? Paolo, we can take that up. Also, I'm just looking at the time, and I know everyone's probably needing their caffeine fix. So then just kind of in closing, what I'd like to do is, yesterday we had this this symbolism of the magic wand, and it was used to say AI is this, magic wand, and we have to get rid of this kind of mythology. But if you had a magic wand, not an AI wand, but if you had a magic wand and you could do what you think is the most important thing to do to overcome one of the issues that we discussed, what would you do with your magic wand? In 30 seconds or less.
Wow. I would really like people to be more collaborative. I really would like, at all levels of society, having these dialogues are great. I will have a chat with you, later on with Paula and talk about that topic. I heard you. And yeah, I think collaboration, getting on the same page and acting on it, like in everything, whether it was the pandemic, whether it's, the AI crisis, the climate crisis, we need collaboration at all levels of society to come together. And that would be my magic wand, to talk to each other, duke it out, get out with an action plan and start implementing. Enough with the talking.
Love it.
I'd like to just add to that, as a sociologist, my magic wand then would be to the conditions, the social conditions that enable us to be collaborative. Maybe start with socializing infrastructures and democratizing infrastructures and production.
Mine would be, at the society level, because that's really the problem, would be to ensure that people think, both men and women think, that we may be different in capacity, in capabilities, in function, but our roles really are complementary. Nobody is superior or inferior to each other. Our roles complement each other, so that in everything you do, you see that person, whether a man or a woman, as somebody you're complementing to make the human society safe for us, and every other thing will be fine. AI and all that will be good. That would be what I would do.
May I add just one thing? just one thing.
Okay, sure, okay. Benedetta, you can participate in the magic wand, yeah. Sheila's just going to add one thing.
Just one thing about this, whole thing. It's not, this is what I read, it's not a pie. If we have more slices, it doesn't mean there's less pie for for others. So that's just,
Now I'm hungry.
So magic wand, given that I started using this concept, I would say, why not imagine having all women prime ministers with a very clear climate action agenda and elected to act on this in the next year? Let's see what happens.
Love it, yeah, girl. Okay, so we can all talk about our magic wands over the coffee break, yeah? But let's give a round of applause for our panelists. Wonderful, well done. One quick thing as we're going to the coffee break, for all the people who are speaking today, whether you're online or here in person, make sure you are at your session 10 minutes before your session starts. Make sure you have slides on a USB so that we can get things set up so that we don't have delays. 10 minutes before the 3-talk session, not just 10 minutes before your talk. Have a wonderful rest of the day.